Bob and I were just turning to each other like, who would want to preach after this? A morning like this, I'm very glad to be Chris Alexander this morning. Yes, for me as liturgist, I'm already feeling smarter and more organized all morning. But we're very pleased to be joined by our special guest, Reverend Dr. Bob Grove Markwood. Many people aren't aware in the UCC that we are both the oldest and one of the youngest denominations in the United States. We're the oldest because our predecessors through the congregational Christian heritage go back clear to the Pilgrims. And yet we're the second youngest major denomination, younger only to the Evangelical Lutheran Church, because we were actually a merger of two streams that merged in 1957 as a number of Christians were recognizing that the worlds are rocking, and God is, the world is changing, and God is not passive in that God's doing a lot of new things in response to a lot of newness and change in the world, and that we would probably be better off to both meet the challenges of the future and the opportunities if we join hands with similar spirited people. Those with whom we recognize we have more in common than the differences. And move together into the future joyfully, and then we became the United Church of Christ in 1957. Bob Grove Markwood represents very much that same spirit in our day. If you're going to look for a person who represents the strengths of the long tradition of Christianity in America, you can't do much better than Bob Grove Markwood. He's been a member of an ordained minister in the UCC for about 32 years, but also served as president of a 200-year-old seminary, Bangor Theological Seminary, which has been one of the closely related UCC seminaries in the United States, in Bangor, Maine. So there's incredible depth of tradition that he represents. But he also represents this amazing spirit of innovation. A couple of years ago, Bangor Seminary recognized, there's a whole lot of seminaries out there that are doing what we're doing, and more than enough places for students to go. And in our world, it is continuing to change dramatically, and God is, with lots of both challenges and opportunities. And what was missing in the landscape out there largely are people with this depth of tradition who are saying we need to be incubators right now, looking for what is the inbreaking of ministry in our world that's doing it in a new form, but yet carrying the tradition forward in an innovative way. So the the Bangor Theological Seminary literally voted to close its doors at a seminary, recognizing there were other seminaries out there students could go to, and become this amazing incubator. Looking for joining hands with individuals, with organizations and churches who represent kind of this inbreaking and the ways that we're currently meeting the present challenges with recognizing them as opportunities. And we're very glad, very humbled to be one of those congregations that the BTS Center has chosen to partner with through the Converging Paths Lay Ministry project, which they consider and we consider to be rather revolutionary on the Christian landscape. So welcome, Bob Grove Markwood, and your spirit here this morning. Our passage comes from another time of great change, tumult and opportunity in the middle of the 8th century BCE. You may remember the series we did about a year ago called Prophetically Incorrect, which was a series about the prophet Amos, an 8th century prophet who preached to the north of Israel. This is now a passage that comes from an 8th century prophet preaching to the south. From chapter 5, some verses you may remember from Christmas time. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephratah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has brought forth. Then the rest of his kindred shall return to the people of Israel. And he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall live secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be one of peace. And from chapter 6, more familiar verses. With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with ten thousands of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He has told you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice, and to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God.
Wow. So he pumps me up, my ego and everything else, and then he takes care of me in all these other little ways. He's amazing. And by the way, we're not worthy. It's like, wow, that was wonderful. That got me ready. But here's the deal. If you're thinking baby Jesus after the Bethlehem piece there, and in the narrative lectionary, that particular passage happens now, but in the Revised Common Lectionary, it's in Advent, right before Christmas, that we would read that passage from Micah. So I want to say, if you're starting to think Christmas and baby Jesus, be patient, okay? Be patient. So the pillar of patience is what we're going to try to get into in some ways today. But first, I do want to say thank you, and I just love coming here. It's like, wow, thank you, Eric. It is, but more than that, to say for myself and my colleague, Dr. Pam Schellberg, who's over at the new church service this morning at 11, was here at 9. But for the two of us, we really are grateful to Eric and Melanie, and to Bruce and Mariana, to Chris, and to Kelly and others who have just welcomed us extravagantly and warmly. This is my third trip on these visits to continue the conversation, an ongoing conversation that we're having with Countryside around this Converging Paths program, this lay ministry program. And the conversations are rich, and this visit has been no less a wondrous and exciting time for us in this developmental stage of seeing where is the need and how might we respond to God's call to meet this need in a church that is going through significant changes. Who you are and where you are and what you are is an amazing thing. This place is a place of vitality and life and ministry that exceeds the norm. I want to say that to you. But what you know, and what many of you probably know, and what we've found is that there also is another factor. Something's happening in Christendom, and it's the word decline is often used, unfortunately and sadly. But it's a changing landscape. And the changing needs of ministry and leadership are changing. And so there are those of us who feel committed, and I would say Eric and Bruce are right at the top of that list of people who have the capacities and the commitments to certainly be faithful in serving the new needs of the church as it continues to change. And yet there is this ancient wisdom and this ancient spirit, this ancient knowledge and this ancient faith that still persists. And so we are a part of all of that. Patience, the pillar of patience. What we know is, at least I'm going to say what I know, what I believe, is that patience is easier if you have power, if you have privilege, if you've got plenty of food in the cupboard, if you know where your next meal is coming from and where you're going to stay tonight. It's easier to be patient if you've got the means to live and survive and live actually very comfortably, as many of us do. More challenging, however, is the reality of the world around us. Too many people, and more people every day, who are not comfortable. They are not surviving well. And so patience is a precious commodity among those for whom hunger is real and shelter is scarce, and they don't know where their next meal will come from. That context is something that exists in Omaha and Portland, Maine. It exists throughout the world. It existed in Micah's time as well. There were rich and there were poor. There were wealthy, there were powerless, there were powerful. So as Micah is striving to remain patient, waiting for God, there is also an impatience in Micah. In the early chapters of his book, it's a little Haiti in terms of his own critique of the culture around him, especially those who had power and privilege and position in the communities. The political leaders, the business leaders, the wealthy, the religious leaders were abusing their positions and their power. They were cheating the poor out of their land, evicting the widows. Their thumbs were on the scales, taking advantage of their customers, and and religious authorities were complicitous in all of this culture of corruption and commodification. So, come some thousands of years later, here we are in our own land, and what we would say today, we still see abuses of power. We see the wealthy and the poor, these extremes that are actually growing right before our eyes. We see indifference, if not hostility, sometimes to the poor and those without power or voice. We see religious complicity in this landscape, in this culture of corruption at times. And it's a sad thing. And it seems, I think I could make the case, that there is sufficient DNA markers between our DNA and that of Micah's time to say, you know what, we probably have a lot in common. We are family, the family of faith. Those are our forebears. And what they were going through was this time of experiencing structural problems. Structural problems. To deal with our theme, dwelling and indwelling, the house that God built, that people of God, Israel, Judah, the people of God, the house of God. What Micah was really trying to put his finger on and point to was, we got some foundation issues. We got problems. We have structural issues. And so what he did not have that we have was Home and Garden TV, okay? To help us analyze the situation, to help us understand how we might address the problem. He was lacking that kind of resource. But I want to tell you, it's one of the best. The last couple of years, I've had a little bit more of a job than I had the years before that, and I had a little more free time, especially in the evenings, so that, House Hunters International, it's right at the top of the list. But that was daydreaming stuff. But how many times, and I didn't care how many times there were repeats of Property Brothers, Love It or List It, okay, you know what I'm saying? Some really annoying people, though, I'm telling you right now. I felt bad. I felt bad for her so many times. Rehab Addict, she's very, very clever, very cute. Income Property, probably the top of my list. I think he's just really, really smart and sharp. But here's what we know, is if your sills are punky, you're looking at a new house and there are cracks or there are problems, or the present place you're living is just not working for you anymore, maybe the plumbing is out of date, the sewer lines have collapsed in the yard, electrical is old, knob and tube, that kind of stuff, you got problems, right? What do you got to do? You need a renovation, you need to update, you need to upgrade. I've watched enough HGTV to know, here's the pattern. If you're going to reno, you got to demo, right? So demo precedes reno. That's our paradigm for understanding Micah, I think, and what was going on with those people. What's also true is that especially like Love It or List It seemed to be the one, and Income Property, yeah, they all did, didn't they? As soon as you start ripping down sheetrock, pulling up carpets, doing all that stuff, you don't know what you're going to find. And I always thought, how did they not know that was there, this problem that's going to cost another $10,000? But, this is the reality. We don't know always until we start digging and we start tearing down. And then we find sometimes it's worse than we thought. And sometimes we find it's just as bad as we thought it was. So Micah, trying to be patient, but a certain urgency about needing to take some action, prophesies about the fall of Jerusalem. And in those early chapters, there's a lot of demo going on in the house that God built. The people who had broken covenant, this unfaithfulness that was throughout the land, something was going to happen, was what Micah realized, and it was not going to go well, and we need to demo so that we can reno. And that's what happened. He knew without HGTV, he knew that a metaphorical coat of paint was not going to fix this problem, right? We're not going to just do a few touch-ups. We're not going to just, put a new rug down over that stain. We're not going to fix those things that need to be taken out and replaced and fixed deeply. So he's not going to restore the spiritual, the structural, and aesthetical integrity of God's house without some pretty radical work. And in the midst of what must have felt like a total gut job was at hand, I imagine Micah coming up with this sort of sense, getting to that point in the process of the renovation where you suddenly start seeing, okay, I can start seeing how this is going to come into shape. I mean, he was optimistic, and just God is going to be there with us, and this is going to work out okay. We're going to be able to turn this around. But there came that moment when he was able to say, it's going to happen. It's going to be good. We're going to make this work. And so he imagines for us this new ruler, a new kind of ruler, and also then what that new ruler will make possible is a new kind of relationship of faith in God's house, between God and the people of God, a new relationship. They would be able to come home again, and that home would be a good place for all. So speaking of ruler, here's an image, a picture that's going to be coming up that was drawn by 3-year-old Brennan, who is part of the Mount Carmel United Methodist Church in Norcross, Georgia. And I came across this online on a Facebook site. Pastor Cindy McDonald tells me over Facebook, said that Brennan's mom helped with the ruler. And I was sort of relieved because I was thinking, wow. It's like, I got a 4-year-old grandson. I said, step it up. Let's go. This is three-year-old stuff. We got to do better. So anyway, but do you see the sort of literal interpretation of verse 5:2? O Bethlehem, from you will proceed for me a ruler over Israel. Okay. Well, I thought it was really, really cute. But I also saw something else in there, not just that sort of pun, that very literal pun. There's something else going on there, because what this child has sort of touched on is really kind of flagged for me a very human condition of wanting to quantify and measure things, even relationships, right? So, and that's what's happening here with Micah in this narrative now that Micah sort of narrates this controversy, this conversation between God and the people, and God is like, what have I done that has burdened you and wearied you so? And and that was a rhetorical question. You understand? It was like God already had the answer. It's like, no, I didn't. So here's the problem. You're the problem, not me. And here's what's happened. You've broken the covenant, and you know what? We got to fix this thing. We got to make this work. And the people, their response is, and commentators have two kind of takes on this. Some say, yeah, it's kind of a sarcastic, yeah, well, you want like 10,000 rivers of oil or something? And no, not necessarily teenager. That really probably is not as, for me, not as likely. I think more likely is that sense of, how can we make this work? You see, human nature, we want to measure everything and make it work. And we want to see this sort of this proposal. We want to see the proposal. We want to see all the numbers. We want to see just how this is going to work out. You got an invoice. You got some, an estimate that we can look at beforehand. But that's not what this is all about. You see, there are implications here, and what this renovation that's needed is really not about quantifiable things. It's about us. It's about these people of God, and that's us. And the hard part about these stories is it's our story, not just somebody's story a long time ago. And in this story, God is the contractor, asking the people to trust the work that has been done and where this is all going to go. The demo and the reno. Trust it's going to work out just fine. And what we're going to end up with is a more safe, secure, hospitable, beautiful place to dwell. And God will dwell with God's people, all God's people. But imagine all those HGTV shows that you've seen and how resistant people were, some of those shows, to the suggestions of the professionals, and how they lost it over, we're moving a door. We can't possibly move that door, right? So as hard as it is for people to let a door be moved or a space be reconceived in their home, how much harder is it for some of us to let our hearts be moved or our arms opened to embrace others that may not be like us or that we don't like, or you know what, they don't like us, so there. How hard is it to change? So this conversation about relationship, in which I sort of imagine God saying, and I'm hearing a dozen different love it or leave it programs in which usually it was one spouse or the other was saying, you know what, I'm done with this place. I am so fed up. Nothing works right. The space does not suit us anymore. It's not small. It's too small. It's too big, whatever. They want some change. It's not working. And I can imagine God replying, or rather God saying that, we need this change. I need to get out of here. And the people saying, okay, is it the bathroom? You want 2 sinks? We got 2 sinks. I'm going to do it. 3-car garage? That's fine. Just, can we just stay? Let's just stay. I don't want to go. What do I need to do to make this work for you? That's what the people were saying to God. What do we need to do? But the problem was they kept thinking in terms of numbers and quantities. And they had these checklists. And what God was trying to say is, you know what? It isn't the bathroom. It isn't the kitchen. It isn't the garage. It's the whole thing. It's us in this space together. It's everything. Everything needs to change. So, help me get some understanding of where we go with this. And Micah says, you know what you're supposed to do now. You know what you're supposed to do. The kids helped us out already. I didn't even need to preach this part. I could just turn the page. What do we need to do? Do justice, right? Love kindness, walk humbly. But let's look a little deeper. Do justice, not as a list of tasks, right? However worthy those tasks may be, those good things that we do. Not a compartment in your life, but your whole life is do justice. Your whole life in which you take on tasks, because that's what we do. But your tasks don't take over your life. And love kindness in Hebrew said is this steadfast loyalty, this covenant love, this kind of kindness, this mercy, this loyalty that will not ever let go. It's 100% certain, like Horton, right? Remember Horton? Absolutely. So Fatima Kashavarz, in one of the By This Way of Life DVDs, says, love is the only thing you can't do except wholeheartedly. She says, you can't do it 50%. If it's 50% love, it's something else. Love is 100%. It's the only way that love can work, isn't it? And not just about God, but in all our relationships. You love wholeheartedly, or it's not really love. And then walk humbly with your God, that deep relationship with God that is a way of life that acknowledges it's not all about us. Yeah, you want granite and stainless steel. Okay, You got it. It's not all about you, though, at the end of the day, right? Is there something more than that? I hope so. I hope there's something more than that for you. How about a path? How about a journey through life that can be sustained for your whole life because of God's gifts, including patience? So 3 apparently disparate elements: do justice, love kindness, walk humbly. And here's the thing. Those are the elements of our faith, of our lives, but they are not separate. They are inextricably woven together. They are integrated, and that's how we need to see them. You can't have one without the other. Can one do justice as an act of faith without love or without a relationship to God? I'm not sure that makes any sense. Is it love true if we don't act out of that love as an expression of faith? I'm not sure that's really the love we're talking about here. And is our faith grounded if our love is not somehow incarnate in acts of justice and kindness for others? So these 3 seemingly separate things are really meant to be in a Trinity-like conversation and collaboration that helps us sustain our relationship with God, a right relationship with God and one another. And so finally, I think this is incredibly important, because by integrating these things, what we really end up with is a wholeness that helps us achieve and move down the road toward a holiness. It's no accident, no coincidence that the BTS Center blog we named Bearings and Navigation, and the subtitle is Navigating Life as Ministry. Justice is your life. Loving kindness is your life. Walking humbly with your God is your life. It's ministry. That's what we are about as the people who follow Jesus and who profess this patience with waiting for that day to come in which all will be one again. So may God bless you in your journey, and may God give you patience to wait until that day comes. And thank you. Amen.